Hello, Woo crew, and welcome back to another episode of the Woo Curious Podcast. I am your host, Eileen of My Luminous Life, and I am here today solo. This is a solo episode, so you know the drill. It'll be a little bit shorter than my guest episodes. And before I dive in, I just wanted to make sure that those of you who are tuning in every week and listening know how important you are to me. I am so grateful for everybody who listens, everybody who shares. If you are able to leave a review, a 5-star rating, that really helps. It helps me get the word out. It helps me show up in those podcast apps. And in gratitude, I would love to make sure also that you get my affirmations for worthiness and abundance that I recorded a couple of weeks ago. If you're on my email list, you'll likely have already accessed that. But if you're not, I'm going to leave a link in the show notes. I'm getting some really beautiful feedback about this particular guided affirmation track. And so I want to make sure that you don't miss out on it. So link in the show notes below. And today I'm going to be talking about the witch wound for a couple of reasons. One, it's important, and this is the Woo Curious Podcast, and I am a witch, and we talk about all things woo and witchcraft here and spirituality. And more relevantly, it's because it really got pulled to the forefront of my consciousness last week. If you are following me on social media at myluminous_life_, then you may have seen that I started posting on TikTok and immediately got myself my first hater. I feel like it's a rite of passage. My mom sent me a message to say she was really sorry that happened to me. I had several people reach out to say that I've made an impact in their lives. So I'm going to get to the reason why I'm not upset about this in any way, shape, or form in a little bit. But I wanted to start with the story that set this whole chain of events, this whole cascade off in a little more detail than I was able to go into it in short little video posts on TikTok, on Instagram. I know that you're able to have me in your ears as you go about your day listening to this, and so it affords me a bit more time to connect in, to give you the details, to really dig into why this is such an important topic for so many women. And the big reason, as the title of this episode suggests, is because the witch wound and the way that it shows up in our lives, the way that we express it, the way that women around us express it, usually without any conscious awareness of that expression, is it keeps us out of our power. So I want to talk about it today. I'm going to share this story, and I'm going to share some ways that we can start to become aware of it, and we can start to uproot it from our systems. So the story that I had shared that sparked this woman's comment was a really brief little story. I had been having brunch, my monthly brunch, with two of my beautiful healer friends. We came through wild medicine energy healing training together, and we go for a monthly brunch. And we check in, we see, how each other are doing, we share our lives. And one of the healers was sharing about her daughter in her dance class. And she has been having some struggles with the teacher. My healer friend is also a dance teacher, and so the woman who is teaching her daughter, it feels a bit like she might be taking out her frustrations with any and all of the kids' antics, perhaps, with my friend, because she can approach her and just tell her things the way you would never do to a parent who's got a child enrolled in your course that you don't actually know. But long story short, my friend's daughter is strong-willed. She is precocious. She is confident in who she is. She isn't ashamed of who she is. She knows her mind. She might be a bit of a know-it-all sometimes, and I can resonate with that. in a world where we are constantly having to prove ourselves, if we're smart and we know it and we know things and we want to share them, especially when we're young, this girl is young, it's natural to want to share. And this teacher is having a hard time with her. She's actually gone so far as to tell her she's too much. Cue the groan and eye roll. And what this teacher is coming up against and exhibiting herself is in Peace, a Witch Wound. Because there is this deeply embedded, unwritten rule that is kind of coded into our DNA for the last several generations. It's becoming less and less, obviously, but it's still there. You're going to be familiar with the saying, little girls should be seen and not heard. When we break this unwritten rule and we speak up and make ourselves heard, it can ruffle feathers. And yeah, if you're wrangling, 10, 12-year-olds in a dance class, I can totally see how it could be really difficult and challenging if one or a few of them are interrupting or in practice disrupting things. It's hard. But it's this squashing of energy, of creativity, of expression that is really tying back into the witch wound. And so what happened when I shared this story, and I hadn't even spoken about the witch wound, I just said, the world is not comfortable with strong, independent women. It just isn't. It's not set up for us to be a welcome part. And this applies to men to some extent as well. Society, the overculture, wants the status quo because it is what keeps society ticking along while we're all going to work, exhausted, too tired to kick up a fuss or make a stink about changes and policies and things that maybe aren't in everybody's and the world's best interest. But this woman said, duh, wake up, honey. This started in the 60s. And you're not going to make any difference. You're not making a difference, and you never will make a difference. So basically, she said, shut up. And rather than be upset, my initial response was like, ooh. And then it was an immediate comfort of knowing that these words were spoken from the witch wound. And there's two different ways that they could actually have been showing up for her. I was really thankful to one of my dear clients who, after I posted my response about what I thought was going on and how it was an example of the witch wound, when I posted my response, a client of mine actually said, or it could be this other way. And so I want to speak to both of them here because I think they both are facets or aspects of the witch wound. So the first thing that jumped into my mind was that she felt confronted by me showing up, speaking candidly, and saying something that she feels like she has known for a long time. I wasn't saying it as though it was new information, but that's how she took it. I wonder if perhaps back in the 60s, she did take a stand and stand up for the things that she believed in and tried to be a ruffling feathers kind of woman and has just been shot down her whole life. And so there's a bit of pain or wounding there. And when she sees other people trying, it kind of, raises the fur on her back if she were a cat, so to speak. So perhaps she's upset that she didn't get to use her voice for that, or that she did and she wasn't heard. Or perhaps it raised unconsciously some fear for the repercussions for me for speaking out. And both make a lot of sense. Whether it's that she's upset or challenged or confronted by me standing in my power and speaking my truth, whether she is feeling upset because she tried that and it didn't work and now she doesn't want anybody else to have the stage, or whether it be that she's actually feeling like a triggering fear for me. These are all ways that the witch wound plays out. And it plays out in women censoring and silencing each other. Whether it be through bullying, whether it be through cattiness, competition, this self-policing that women do in our society and have done for a long time is a direct byproduct of the witch wound. We go back to the burning times, and if you've been a listener for a long time, you'll have heard Ellie and I speak to this on our episode about the witch wound and the sister wound and the mother wound. about how during these times, neighbors were pitted against neighbors, women against women. Primarily 80% of the people who were persecuted and tried during the witch trials, the burning times, were women. So this was primarily a women's wound, though not all. There are places in the world, like Iceland, where it was actually a majority of men, not women. Basically, women would tell on their neighbors. They would go behind their back in order to try to save themselves. They were encouraged to be suspicious of each other, right? Because it was a way of self-preservation. And so this has rippled through society. We see it in the catty backstabbing that can happen. I was actually watching an episode of Seinfeld recently with my partner, and in the episode, Elaine and one of her coworkers, they're getting catty and people keep making that sound, like a woman can't be upset with another woman without it being catty, but it's also kind of like it's egged on. When I was growing up, I remember feeling like I was in competition with other women for teachers' approval, for parental approval, for men's approval, especially as I got older and got to the point of my life where I was seeking romantic relationships. There was a real strong undercurrent of trying to win over men to prove my worth over and above women. And so this wound has really come with us a long way. A lot of what I'm speaking to is the sister wound, that distrust of our sisters. I think it's part of why the work that people like Rebecca Campbell are doing is so important. The work that I'm seeing starting to happen and ripple out in a lot of coaching spaces, where it's this female, heart-centered entrepreneurial leadership that's starting to happen and starting to rise, where it's a rising tide lifts all boats and not I'm going to step on you to get ahead. So as I'm speaking, I'm sure you're starting to see some of the ways in which this might bubble up for you personally, whether it be in competition with other women at work, whether it be in competition with other women in the romantic sphere, whether it be just that feeling of discomfort or confrontation that so many of us can recognize when a powerful woman walks into the room, owning her space. Like, who does she think she is? If you have ever had that reaction, whether you expressed it or not, that's your witch wound showing. And trust me, I still have that reaction, though it's a lot less frequent. And so sometimes we're noticing the witch wound in ourselves, and then sometimes we're noticing it in others. And as I mentioned, the problem with this wound is that it keeps women self-policing to stay small. So if you think about it, if we think back to this woman who told me to shut up, if you are cutting somebody else down from speaking up and speaking out, from standing in their power, somebody who shows up unabashedly, claiming what is hers, her power, all of that jazz, then you're basically telling your subconscious that it's not safe for you to speak up, for you to step into your power, for you to shine and show up fully in your whole embodied truth and self. Just like when we talk about things like money mindset and how if we believe that money is the root of all evil, we sure as shit are not calling any into ourselves. So too, if we believe that a big, bright, audacious woman is, who does she think she is? We're telling our subconscious that it's not safe to show up, to be visible, to go after our dreams. And this is such a passionate topic for me because it's something that I see coming up with my clients over and over, with my friends, with myself, obviously, and with the haters. And it's such a wonderful thing to have done this work for long enough that my response to this woman, aside from an initial moment of like, oh, who the fuck do you think you are? Because that was my knee-jerk gut reaction, initial response, emotional response. But it went away really, really quickly. And instead of replying with a snarky comment the way I would have done, probably about 4 years ago, I would have come back guns a-blazing in righteous anger. And that would have accomplished nothing. And so I'm so grateful for the learning and the growth and the healing journey that I've been on and that I now get to take my clients through, because rather than staying in that knee-jerk reaction place, I immediately was able to soften into, oh, I am so sorry that this is your response to a woman speaking a truth. I am so sorry that you are in a place where cutting other women down on the internet is part of how you spend your time. And I'm not sorry in a patronizing way. I am truly and deeply, compassionately sorry. Because if you're spending your time cutting others down, it's one thing to have that quick a reaction inside. It's another to take time out of your day to, like, verbally or in writing or whatever way, act on that feeling. You have to be coming from a place of hurt and wounding. And I so badly want to help. So I really was also a bit thankful to her for giving me a moment to teach, but I wish it hadn't had to happen, you know? So what do you do if you notice the witch wound popping up in your life, in your responses to others, or in their responses to you? So I think it's very, very empowering just to be able to notice that it's happening, especially when it's directed at you, because what it does, it immediately pulls in that first of the 5 agreements. Don't take it personally. It's not personal, right? If somebody says something nasty to you after you have shown up in genuine, open honesty, then you know it's not about you. It's so much about them. So it can be really helpful in getting a bit braver about speaking up, about standing in your power. And then the other piece is catching it in yourself. And when you catch it, the first most important thing to do is to offer yourself compassion and grace, right? You are human. You have been living saturated in this wound. If you're a woman and a female body, you have been living with this wound for generations. We've all been, men as well, as I mentioned earlier. It tends to impact women more if that's this life for you. So know that this runs deep. It's in your DNA. It's something that you've been bathed in, especially if you are, in your late 20s to 30s. Like, you grew up with this being almost like praised. I think about that song by Brandy and whomever, The Boy Is Mine. It came on the radio the other day again, and it's just the worst. It's this competition between 2 women over one man who's clearly playing them both, and rather than see that and be like, hey, we are on the same side, this guy's a douchebag, they are fighting about him. And so, if you find yourself in that space where your reaction to a woman in her power is, who does she think she is? If you feel uncomfortable, and maybe you feel uncomfortable because you're feeling worried for her. I certainly have had that feeling as well. And part of it is this discomfort of like, what must others think? So it's all there, right? It's really, really convoluted and messy and tangled. And the first step is just to notice. And notice when it does, how it's sitting in your body, pausing before you actually respond outwardly, and hopefully catching yourself before you say things that you might regret or not mean. And again, being so gentle and so tender with yourself. Don't make yourself wrong. Just notice. Forgive yourself. Move on. Okay. I think that is all for today. Keep your eyes on my Instagram, myluminous_life_. Grab yourself that guided affirmation for worthiness and abundance. That's tied into this witch wound as well. So that'll get you on my email list as well. And that way you won't miss out on any of the upcoming offerings. I will be running another 5-day free journey in June. We had Bloom back at the end of March, harnessing those energies of spring. And we're going to have Shine in June to harness the energies of summer. And I cannot wait for it. I'm really excited. If you have any questions, you know how to find me. And if you have any comments, please go ahead and leave them over at the Woo Curious Podcast on Instagram, or come find me at myluminous_life_. It is, as always, a pleasure dropping into your ears, and I can't wait to be back here with you next week. Bye for now, Woo Crew.